One Piece is a mythology. The way I view it is as a creation story for the modern day. And I don't think that's much of a stretch because a lot of what One Piece, the inspiration that it takes, is from other mythologies throughout the world, as well as historical events. The entire point of a creation story is to explain things. It's to make sense of the world around you, whether that be abstract concepts, whether that be events that have already happened or have taken place, or even things that are going to happen that you need to be prepared for. The point of them is to teach people a lesson, to try and have them learn something and be prepared for what is coming, because it's supposed to help you just understand the world in which you live in and how you affect certain things and how certain things affect you. And that's all well and good, but how exactly does that specifically make One Piece a mythology, more or less a creation story? It's because the way that One Piece as a story is structured is very similar to that of a mythology or a creation story in and of itself. How abstract concepts are personified into different people, whether that be via devil fruits or titles that certain people carry. Or the very interactions between characters and certain locations are talked about throughout the world itself. Imagine, if you will, that 1,000 years after like the end of the One Piece story proper, somebody chronologically like takes the events of even just the Straw Hats journey throughout the world. 1,000 years later, it would seem like insanely impossible, and obviously over that like long of a time period, it would also be very embellished. It is trying to tell the story of essentially a god rising to his peak and then later setting. And not just that one god, but an entire crew of who are effectively deities by either just association towards Luffy or by their own merit in things that they are able to like accomplish while like still on this journey, whether that be Zoro being the world's greatest swordsman, whether that be Usopp effectively being like a prophet that is able to predict the future, Nami having control over the weather itself. The point being, a retelling of this story when you are fully aware of everything that's happening and try and go back to it from the beginning makes it does sound like something straight out of a mythology, and that's something I find way more fascinating about it because again, it is trying to teach you something. It is giving you different lessons throughout how you can look at your own world through events that are fictional, yes, but are based in reality. The ideas of freedom, oppression, fighting against the system, how these different characters coming from different backgrounds, having different goals, are able to sail onto one crew and still have a grand adventure that affects the entire world. It is a story teaching you about freedom and what people will do in order to get it, and how that freedom can also be taken away. This is something that is paralleled in the real world with actual events. So I want to take the time to try and walk through some moments during the story of One Piece, how knowing what you know now recontextualizes a lot of it, and how moving forward in the story itself, or even in like the real world, how portraying that like a creation story and trying to get more out of it is not only very helpful, but also incredibly insightful, which how the story itself is presented and how you can try and present it to other people, as well as kind of introduce you to a new way of essentially taking in this story and maybe even being able to understand more themes or topics that may have gone over your head or you may not have noticed the first time. Whether that be interactions with certain characters, locations and events and how they parallel into the real world, or even something that I may just probably miss. Because again, I've talked about this very topic about One Piece being mythology in the past, but I mostly make those videos on TikTok, and a lot of people are just like, "Oh, you should make like YouTube videos on these," and I've been very hesitant for a very long time, but I've thought, you know what, might as well. So this is my attempt at that. And for a long time I was thinking, okay, what exactly should like my first official video in this long form format be? And I really wanted to talk about One Piece as a mythology cuz I love viewing it in that lens. There's so much to actually talk about when from all the way from the beginning of the story to where we are now. And I will say there will be spoilers for the third act of One Piece. So post Wano onward. So currently, as I'm making this, we are in Elbaf right now. So there will be some spoilers for that because I will have to talk about Luffy and his connection to like the idea of divinity in order to talk about how it fits into this idea of a mythology. Because if you're going back all the way from the beginning, Luffy's journey is very similar to that of something like Journey to the West, or the Odyssey. Because again, like the events of One Piece is a grand odyssey. It's a massive adventure that's more about the journey than the destination. Luffy echoes the sentiment in Sabaody when he's presented with the opportunity to figure out what the One Piece is. He denies it. He's just like, no, I don't care about it. I want the adventure more than like the actual prize at the end of it, because that's what Luffy values. That is the value that the Sun God holds as he's sailing across the world. And Luffy being the Sun God here is very important because the first major thing is Luffy is from the East Blue. He is the Sun God rising in the East and will eventually set in the West. When he gets to Wano, that's where he rises and meets his peak. That is the end of Act 2 of the story. That is the highest point in which the sun will reach, and now he is there, suspended, and eventually, throughout the rest of his life, he will begin to set. Now, that doesn't mean Luffy is just getting weaker and weaker as time goes on. It's more so to say that, oh, this is the symbol of the sun rising. Because oftentimes in different mythologies, you will see the sun rising and setting as an allegory for death and rebirth. And Luffy goes through this many times throughout his own story. One of these, you could argue, is Sabaody and like the 2-year time skip. Another time is in Impel Down, where one of my favorite examples is that the sun god dying in the depths of hell is being praised. Let me rephrase that. The sun god is being praised in the depths of hell where his believers lie, and through that devotion, through that belief, he is able to carry them to freedom. Now, obviously, the prisoners of Impel Down don't know that Luffy is a sun god or that he is a liberator, but it's not through, like, their knowledge, it's through Luffy's actions in which they will believe this later. Not the exact myth of the sun god Nika, but what Nika embodies and what Luffy is actually able to do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start over from the very beginning, when we have Luffy having his initial rise, when he's given the Straw Hat and he's then sets out into the world to try and have his pursuit of freedom, who he meets along the ways, and how that affects everything that moves on in his own journey. Luffy's story is one about freedom and passing that on to those who he is able to go with, who he interacts with, and stomping out oppression wherever he sees it. He doesn't know, he can't explain to you the exact reason why he does this. It's more so of a byproduct of him being there, because whenever Luffy sees oppression in an area, he will give the people the light they have been looking for in order for them to motivate themselves and get it done on their own, because essentially that is what a god does. A god is not something that is just going to give the people everything that they need. He gives them the hope and inspiration in order for them to be able to take it for themselves. Kobe is a prime example of this. Kobe wants to be free. He wants to have this idea that, oh, I can move past this. I can go forward into this world and be able to fight for the justice that I believe is in this world. And it's not a Marine that gives him this sense of justice. It's not someone from his past that gives him the sense of justice. It's Luffy, a pirate, someone who, honestly, he should be working against, someone who has, in the eyes of the world, put him in this position where he is a prisoner on another pirate ship, because a pirate is just as bad as another pirate, but that's not what Luffy is. Luffy is someone who gives him that chance. He even tells him directly, if I die on this journey for trying to achieve my dream, then the world could not tell me otherwise. I died doing what I believed in, chasing my idea of freedom, and this inspires Kobe, and that inspiration goes deeper to everyone that he is with. When they go to Shellstown and meet Zoro for the first time, Zoro's hesitant. He tells them to leave. He doesn't want to be affiliated with any of this. But Luffy isn't having it. He sees something. The Sun God sees something in this man being crucified, this man who will later go on to be the King of Hell, the right hand of the Sun God, the right hand of the future Pirate King. And I love this dynamic because essentially Zoro is here at his lowest moment, being crucified on the oppression that has been delivered by someone else to a land that has been unjustly taken advantage of. So when the Sun God enters, through this idea of divinity, Luffy passing through, not just by divine right he's just gonna free everyone, it's by his actual actions. despite opposition. Luffy doesn't walk in somewhere being like, oh, he is a god, therefore everyone must bend the knee to him. He goes in there and shows why he is capable of changing things in the first place, because he's willing to go for it. He's not a god because people believe that, like, oh, he must rule just because. He is a god because he is able to show the people that, hey, this is what you can believe in. This is what you should believe in. He's spreading this idea not through words, but through action. He's teaching the people around him, and this is where it goes back to the idea of mythology and a creation story. You are using these stories to teach people about certain things, and in Luffy's instance, he's teaching them about freedom in the beginning of his journey all the way till the end, by the idea of being the sun rising and changing by bringing the new dawn. He does this with Koby, he does this with Zoro, and think about that. He is doing this to someone who will later become the King of Hell, and because of this, he becomes like one of his most loyal companions. He'll continue on to do this with Nami, with Usopp, with Sanji, all throughout the East Blue, showing them different things in this world that are worth fighting for, and each of them will bring their own unique narrative to the story. Sanji's is one of my favorite in the East Blue because his whole thing is no one should go hungry. He's able to show this, and he's able to also learn this lesson from the King of Hell, someone who is willing to put everything that he has on the line in order to pursue this goal. Something that is echoed by Luffy, by the Sun God, someone who is also willing to put everything on the line in order to like achieve his goal. And both of them do this by showing them, hey, this doesn't have to come at the cost of anyone else. People's sacrifice should not be wasted. That's a lesson that Sanji ends up learning from both Luffy and Zoro, how they show that, oh, they were willing to sacrifice everything, not because like they're throwing it away, but because it's worth pursuing. It's worth actually taking up arms and going for what you want. Sanji has this fundamental belief that no one should go hungry, which is why he feeds Don Krieg and his men. Yes, I know it's Zeph who initially does this, but that's something that the other chefs had to stop Sanji from doing, because he would have done it anyway. These realizations that each member of the crew has are something that innately they feel, but cannot truly express because of something that is holding them down one way or another. For Sanji, it's this guilt that he feels that, oh, he has to owe Zeph his life for what he did to him. For Nami, it's the oppression that she lives under Arlong, believing that money is the only thing that will keep her and her people safe, but then ultimately being betrayed. And in her darkest moments is when the light shines, when she's stabbing herself in the arm trying to get rid of the tattoo that Arlong like branded her with. It's Luffy who arises, and he in that moment puts his hat on her head, reassuring her of everything, that everything will be all right, because it is a symbol that he is blessing her with in this moment. It is something that he is showing that, oh, the light will prevail as long as you're able to like look for it, as long as you're able to chase that idea of freedom, that dawn that will arise from the darkness. And it's through that dawn each of these characters are able to find something within themselves that before they would never have been able to even think of. Nami is able to manipulate the weather itself from whatever means that she is able to do so, whether that be from like her staff, the things she learned on Witheria, the dials. Usopp is able to essentially like speak truth into the future through his lies. Of anything he says will eventually become true, and that is essentially a sense of divinity. He is more so like a prophet than anything else, and a prophet who serves the sun god. Someone who is honestly, and it makes more sense for Usopp's character the more you see him do this throughout the story, and even achieving like this status of godhood himself, because it is through a prophet or through some sort of messiah that oftentimes like religions are spread, because you need someone to be able to like explain this to the people. And for Luffy, that's Usopp. And then you have like a lot more of the metaphorical aspects that come within like, oh, the sun god, like the king of hell, like all of these different characters going throughout like the world and having these adventures and having them recontextualized, because I love them so much. It's Luffy and everyone in his crew. You have the sun god, the king of hell, the banished prince of a terrible nation, who will later go on to be like have the epithet of like son of the sky. Another character like in Jinbei who has the epithet of son of the sea. Zoro, I already talked about, he has the epithet of son of the earth. Each of them having like their own domains that all serve under the sun. You have Chopper, who is this transforming doctor who despite the fact not starting out as a human, is the embodiment of what humanity and health is in this world. You have Brooke, who's someone who has stepped over like the veil, who has stepped past the veil of death and return, showing that even like death and life and death itself is something that happens under the light of the sun. You have Robin, who is the embodiment of trying to preserve knowledge, and her having like the symbolism of flowers is something that blooms under the light of the sun. Frankie is machines and innovation, future, something that is to look forward to. Again, with the arrival of this new dawn, everything that happens is because of their association with the sun itself. His crewmates are just like a bunch of like people who will eventually achieve godhood on this journey that they are all on, similar to like, again, that of Something to Journey to the West, where most of the journey that they go on is more important than the actual destination itself. And the further you go, not just the crew, but even like the other relations of antagonists and allies that like Luffy and the Straw Hats have are so compelling because of like in relation to what exactly they are. My favorite example is Ace and Luffy. Luffy is the sun, Ace is fire. Fire, it makes sense, is the brother of the sun and will do whatever it can to allow it into the sky and like be as bright as possible. Ace is there on Alabasta to try and help him and protect him from Smoker, who, yes, is smoke, but you could also see him as, like, clouds to try and obscure the sun. So what does fire do? It steps in to try and help its brother so that light is not snuffed out. Again, that's entirely metaphorical, but I love the interpretation that has, that you are able to, like, glean from that. And again, it's something that would make sense in, like, a later rendition of the story. And it's really cool because it doesn't stop there. Like, even continuing on in Alabasta, or let's start from Whiskey Peak, because Robin's association to Luffy being, like, essentially this flower demon that blooms under the light of the sun, that being Luffy. A lot of from the very beginning, from when Robin first interacts with Luffy, she's being genuine in her emotions. When we learn about Robin's backstory and we see everything that she goes through, a lot of the emotions that he has are either a facade or her true emotions that she hides from other people. But whenever Luffy does anything, whether that's like have like some sort of intrigue that she has into Luffy's character, or even genuinely makes her laugh, is something that only Luffy is able to do for so long. It starts in Whiskey Peak, and before I get to that, I do need to talk about the moment where Luffy and Zoro fight each other, because I love the recontextualization of that, them being gods fighting over like what seems to be a damned offering. In the story, it's honestly one of like my least favorite parts, where like Zoro and Luffy just start fighting because Luffy won't hear him out. But in the context of just like, oh, the sun god is enraged against the King of Hell for essentially disgracing the people who had like served him an offering, because Luffy is not like hearing the context. Luffy, every time he is fed like by someone who when he goes to an island, will essentially just like do anything that they want, of just like, oh, helping them overthrow a government. Not anything that they want, obviously. He's gonna like push for them to like have this reinforcement of like, oh, if you fight for this, I will fight along with you. And that is what happens. So when he wakes up and sees that like, oh, Zoro has attacked these people who have given him food, it makes sense that he's enraged. And I like the fact that it is calmed by like Hell and the sun are fighting, and the weather must step in order to calm it down, the weather being Nami in this instance. Again, still not my favorite part of the story, but I do like the fact that these things can be recontextualized and have like a lot deeper meaning towards them. And then you get into like the whole thing with Vivi and Robin trying to essentially like navigate the sun on a path that she sees fit. And Luffy is not having it. He's just like, no, I set my own course. You do not dictate where this ship goes. And Robin's intrigued by this because, again, the sun has a fixed path that he's going to be set on, and the only thing that's going to, like, hinder it or advance it is going to be, like, those who he has, like, allied himself with at this point. And the person that he trusts the most in order to carry him into the future is his navigator, the Weather Witch herself, Nami, being able to actually, like, sail the ship of the sun god. There's obviously, like, a lot more stuff to, like, talk about in both Little Garden and Drum Island, but I want to continue on with Robin's story and how, essentially, when Alabasta, being a place of holy significance in and of itself, not because it has, like, protector deities represented by Devil Fruits as well, because essentially the sun shows up here trying to fight like the desert itself, that being emblematic of crocodile, something that has taken the rain away, something that has taken away something significant to this land in order for them to actually like, move forward. And it's fascinating that at this point in time, a flower is blooming in the desert itself. She needs water in order to survive, but she also needs the sun. So when Luffy and Crocodile fight for the first time, Robin helps him. And in the context of this, like, yeah, obviously a flower would want to help the sun. It needs it in order to survive. And it also gives it something that it needs to survive as well. She gives him water in order to try and figure out, like, hey, use this to, like, overcome the desert itself. And so when Luffy goes in for a round two, it makes her genuinely laugh, like when he begins like leaking from his stomach, because it's allowing her to express true emotion under the light that Luffy is providing her. So when Luffy and Crocodile's final confrontation happens in the catacombs of Alabasta, Robin resigns herself to be like this wilting flower just dying, buried underneath everything. But then Luffy rises once again, as the sun does, and decides, no, as long as I'm rising, everything else around here is going to rise with me. That includes you. And he saves her. He allows the flower to bloom once again. And because of this, she wants to stay in the vicinity of the sun. She doesn't want to leave it. She's just like, oh, I relegated myself to die, but then you forced me to live. Therefore, I'm now your responsibility. And he accepts this. He's just like, no, that makes sense. And it's because he understands his role not only as a captain, but as what he, like, the ideas of freedom that he's instilling within everyone. Because it's not just the idea that, like, oh, Luffy saves her. He also gives her a chance to, like, make something new out of the life that she has been given. It's a beautiful tale of a flower wanting to bloom under the light of the sun and then following that sunlight throughout its journey. Even, like, and again, like, this gets expanded upon more, like, during Water 7 and Enies Lobby, the time skip, where we are now, like, in the story. But that's just one example of something that I absolutely love seeing, and how, like, the recontextualization of all of this as a mythology, as a creation story, teaching you about rising up against oppression, embracing the ideals of freedom, and how each of these, like, abstract concepts are personified, showing that, like, oh, this is how a lot of things get going, this is how a lot of things start, is something that I very much appreciate. And again, like, each and every single arc has this, and it's not just relegated to the Straw Hats, it's everything else around them as well. The admirals themselves are things that quite literally embody different elements of the world. They are personified beings of, like, ice or the cold, magma, light, and I do find it in the case of, like, Kizaru, light itself, despite the fact that fire is the brother of the sun, light itself is trying to obscure the light of the sun in order to, like, snuff out that idea of freedom. And that's something that happens in Marineford. Magma is something that is eliminating fire because it is a primordial flame of the earth trying to get rid of, like, the flame of a new generation. And I also love the idea of, like, the symbolism of the phoenix whenever Marco is present somewhere. It's also the idea of death and rebirth. He's there for Marineford. He's there for the death of the old emperor and the rise of the new one in Blackbeard with the Payback War. He's even there for the death and rebirth of Luffy himself during Wano, because he's also there on Onigashima. It's not that, like, he has, like, a direct involvement of this. It's that he's symbolic of the process that's happening. There's so much more that I want to talk about when it comes to the series. There's, like, I'm fully aware that I can break this down better, and I apologize if a lot of, like, this is just me rambling. This is typically just, like, how I make, like, videos on my TikTok, and again, I'm really just making this because, like, a lot of people are just like, hey, you should make videos like this. It would be really cool, and I thought, like, okay, why not? And I wanted to start off with this topic. I have, like, a lot more insight, not just of, like, in One Piece, but other series that I really like. Another video that I am planning on making is one for, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have no idea how long that's going to take, though. But I did want to be able to talk about this, and I do want to expand not just on, like, the mythology aspect on, like, One Piece or, like, any other series that I do, but I really just want to talk about, like, any topic that I'm really interested in, because that's how I do it on my TikTok, whether that be, like, One Piece, Avatar, Hollow Knight, like, things that I find a fascination with. And I encourage more discussion. Like, if you want to leave a comment, go ahead, because I'd love to see, like, other examples of people having their own versions of, like, how you would tell the story in, like, a retelling, or how it would be told in, like, hundreds or thousands of years later as a mythology, as a creation story, how it is a story of the sun rising and setting throughout the world. Anyway, I hope that made sense. I've been Steve. That is the nickname. Um, I guess like subscribe if you want to. Leave a comment. Follow me on my TikTok. I'll like have that like linked in the description as well. It's also just Steve has arrived. And yeah, I'll try to make these better in the future. I am sitting in a room like everything like behind me is like whiteboard, so I'll try to have like doodles and stuff like in the back. We'll have to make them bigger because that is like kind of far away from me. But hopefully this just gets better because again, it's just gonna be me like sitting here talking about like things that I am interested in and like trying to have discussions with like people and trying to like expand upon those as well. Because again, I absolutely love talking about these things and I want more things to be able to discuss about or sorry, to discuss.